It's 4:06 on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Yeah, baby. This week starring special guest star Mr. Steve Barden. And the crowd goes wild. And this week, we are going to talk about structures, common structures of instrumental cues and instrumentals, which I didn't tell you before the show, Steve. But we have been having all kinds of tech difficulties and seem to have them more or less ironed out now. You'll notice I have no background behind me, but we are having all kinds of crazy audio loops and stuff. So thank you, everybody in the chat room, for your patience. There you are. All right, so you guys can see us. We are broadcasting. All is good in Who Land. Say hi,
Excellent.
Steve.
Hi, everybody in Taxi Land.
All right.
4:06 is the new 4 o'clock.
That's right. What did I do with my books? Hang on. Steve is the author of 2 amazing books. I'm telling you, we just spent an hour trying to solve this audio problem. This is the book that we are working from today. And frankly, I told Steve the other day, I'm a little embarrassed that I haven't done much to promote this book. And it's really important, and it is a great follow-up to this book, which I believe that most of you have. If you don't have this already, you should have it. It's an incredible book that not only explains the musical side of production music, but it explains the business side as well. So I recommend it highly, and everybody I know that's read it absolutely loves it. All right.
If you don't have it, we can't be friends.
That's right. Steve's got a list of everybody who doesn't have it, and he's taken them off his friend list. All right. So the plan is today, we've got 9 cues that are actually in said book. And I want to talk about structures because a lot of people just getting started in the production music industry don't really understand that there's a structure to it. They think that instrumental music is just taking a song, muting the vocal track, and then just letting it play. Excuse me, which in theory is kind of okay, but then you don't have a lead melody. And so people try and cover the lead melody with a piano or a violin or a flute or something, and it ends up sounding like a Ferranti and Teicher record or 101 strings. Sounds like elevator music. So let's start out by talking about the big question, which is the difference between an instrumental, which could be 3.5 minutes long, maybe 3 to 3.5, 3:45, versus an instrumental cue, which is structured for film and television differently than songs and is typically more like 60 seconds, 90 seconds, maybe as long as 2 minutes or 2 minutes and 10 seconds. There's no hard, fast rule, but 90 seconds is kind of the center point for the length of cues. So can you talk about the differences from your professional perspective as to what the difference between an instrumental structure and an instrumental cue structure is?
Yeah, so, back in the days when we took pop songs and we turned them into music for banks and for elevators and supermarkets, basically we just replaced vocals with violin melodies or saxophone melodies. And that was fine it served a purpose. But in the film and television market, when we're talking about production, essentially what we're talking about is, in essence, film scoring, except the difference between film scoring and production music is that in film scoring, the composer is aware of what's going to happen in the scene. They're writing to picture. They know they can convey the emotion, or they can project what emotion they want the audience to feel. We want to do the exact same thing with production music, except we don't know how our music is going to be used. So we are writing blindly, and that's why I try to get people to understand that when you're writing production music, you're really working with a singular emotion. And the music editor or music supervisor is going to select a piece of music that conveys that specific emotion that they're looking for, and they will marry it to the visuals. So we are film composers, but they're putting it together piece by piece. So that's what I've done in this book. Is I presented some tracks that I have had in primarily reality television is the most common usage for production music. And
but not limited to reality. It's probably like 85% of the usage. Is that a fair guesstimate?
yeah, I mean it's become such an industry now. I mean you're seeing production music used in documentaries. You're seeing it actually used in films.
Right.
Um,
And TV commercials, which would have never happened 10 years ago.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's a huge market, but again, uh, we're sticking to a singular emotion, and that's really key to this. So when we're creating these production music cues, we really kind of have to follow a form. We can't just kind of write willy nilly. Like we're not writing a symphony, okay? We're writing a main thematic piece, which we're going to call the A section. Now, if there are other sections, we're going to talk about these different forms, but the primary form in production music is A, B, A, and that means there's the A section, which is the primary thematic material, an optional B section, which is similar but different enough to be distinguishable from the main theme, and then we would return to the A section, which is the primary thematic material. And there are variations on that, and then towards the end we'll talk about breaking the rules.
Okay.
What's
And so
acceptable and what's not.
there's no law in the industry that says you have to follow a form exactly, or how many measures the A section would be, or how many measures the B section would be, or necessarily where the B section would fall. Basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're far more expert at this than I am. I'm more of like a dude with an opinion versus an actual maker of cues. But A sections, to me, are like the chorus of a song. It's the hit, it's the meat, it's the red meat. And the B section is a little break away from that gives the editors the ability to come in with something a little different and then go back into the A section, which is the chorus. Or, you know what? Interesting observation. A B section can either be melodically different, like I've seen people treat it like a bridge of a song where they flip the chord progression rather than G, C, D. Maybe it's D, C, G, some variation thereof. Other people will keep the same musical progression, chord progression going, but may break it down to just percussion or just percussion in an instrument. Anything that differentiates and gives the editor something new to play with and edit in. Is that kind of a fair synopsis that I just explained?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're going to listen to different versions of that. The way what you described though in the song form, with really we're starting with the chorus. If you were to take an instrumental or a vocal song and say, oh, I want to make this into a production music cue, okay, well, your A section probably should not be the verse, the opening verse. It should probably start with the chorus because that is your hook. And then if we jump to a B section, yeah, maybe we can pick from what you wrote for a bridge, if you have a bridge, or a verse, but so that there's some familiarity with the B section to the A section. So it's not completely, we're not jumping into a circus song.
Think of it as the three monkeys sitting on the tree, with hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. If the middle monkey were an elephant, it would look wrong. So basically the B section is the middle monkey. It still has to be a monkey, but it could be a monkey with a different colored coat.
Yeah, that works. That's a visualization.
You should include that in your next book, Steve, because that was really important what I just said.
I will do that.
Thank you. Do you want to play one now and talk it through?
Yeah.
while we're
Let me
talking, I will. I'll let you jump in with that in a second. But I have a question for you, which is while we play it through, should I show the waveforms so that people can follow that and kind of see the
Yeah, why not? Give them something to look at while they're
the
while we're listening.
developmental arc as well. It's important that
Yeah.
they can see that by looking at the waveform. And what was it that I just stepped on that you were going to say?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm sorry.
Already.
Yeah, welcome to my age category.
There are 9 tracks from this book, and there are audio examples online you can listen to. But we're going to probably hear all of them, or if not most of them. The last 3 tracks in the book are dramedy tracks, and they really follow this standard ABA format that is so common, and it's a really good way to set the scene and describe what it is we're going for. Now, in all of these, they are ABA. Now, it's actually AA, B, AA. In other words, the A section is 8 bars, and we're going to repeat it with some variation for another 8 bars, and that's the first A section. Then there's a B section, which is only 8 bars, and then we go back to the double A section. So, in other words, the first A section is 16 bars, the B section is only 8 bars, but the last and then the last A section is also 16 bars. So they don't always have to be 8 8 8 or 16 16 16. It's just whatever works musically. When you get a placement, honestly, I looked through a lot of my cues years ago and tried to estimate, what was the average usage on a placement, and honestly, it was like 12 seconds. So that's why generally, if you get your A section in there, great. If they get far enough along that they're going to get to the B section, well, that's wonderful. I think probably the longest placement that I ever saw was close to 2 minutes, but those are so rare. So you want to get, the majority of your music done in this A section, all the good stuff. And then the B is just something of a little bit of variety to change it up. So if they do happen to get that far, it just doesn't sound like a loop that's going over and over and over. So I thought we would start with track number 7. It's called At the Casino. And this is kind of a jazz vibe.
All right, and I'm going to throw up, so look for number 7 on the waveforms I'm going to show you guys in a moment. Okay, number 7, At the Casino.
We added bongos in this next half of the A section. And here's the B. We started back to the A, but we still have the bongo going on. And now the strings come up in octave. Adds a little bit more tension. And there's the turnaround stinger. Just repeated the last phrase and ended.
Okay, so I have a question for you. You were talking about the average use of your music is about 12 seconds. And I think a lot of people that are very new to doing instrumentals and instrumental cues, they have the misguided belief that the entire piece is going to play behind a scene. But scenes generally aren't that long, or beats, which are edits within the scenes, aren't that long. So it could be that my favorite example, Kim Kardashian trying to get the cap off a gallon of milk, and she can't because her nails are broken or wet or something. And whoever her husband is this year is in the kitchen talking to her. It might be that, and you think I'm trying to make a joke. No, that was just true, Steve. Anyway, so it might be that the first beat, the camera or the shot, the edit is on Kim and her hands trying to get that thing off. The next beat might be somebody over in the family room area looking into the kitchen from 20 feet away watching this, and they might cut to a different piece of music because the piece of music with her could be frustrating. And the music from 20 feet away, somebody watching this happen, might be a comedic dramedy cue or something else. So that's what he was talking about when he says 12 seconds. It's not like they're going to just let a piece of music run from the beginning to the end. So is that why each section should stand on its own, but if it had to play in its entirety, that there would be a progression and not a linear snore fest?
Yeah, absolutely. And edit points are also very important. And, edit points are just simply where can an editor cut it, and so it could either end or it can start. Now, for it to end, if they want a cue to end, they're going to go to the stinger, which is the very little bit at the end, and they're going to, connect it to, the whatever else they have, the first 8 seconds or something. But if, allow them to start at the B section, so you don't, in other words, you don't have sounds that are ringing over across the bar lines from the previous section to the next section. Make it easier for the editor, and that really increases your chance of it being used, because if they say, it just starts with a sound coming out of nowhere, it makes it unusable. So try to make their job easier.
Is it a true statement? We heard this from, who's the video editor lady that we all adored that I had on stage 2 or 3 times?
Lauren Ostrander?
Yeah, Laurel Ostrander. One of the takeaways that she gave us, I think, at the 2019 Road Rally was she loves when a cue starts out with boom, 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 some sort of drum fill or instrument thing that happens for a second, kind of wakes you up and brings you into the cue. But then the first 8 bars, let's say the A section, could be fairly sparse. The next 8 bars would have more instrumentation doing the same thing, but it saves it from the linear snore fest that I described a couple of minutes ago. Are these things that you think about when you compose, that these little structure tricks that make a piece of music more desirable to an editor? Are they just ingrained in you at this point?
Yeah, well, the technique that she mentioned, that you just mentioned, that she told us about, was like not only a drum beat, but also like a whoosh. That just like, it's almost like a cymbal roll where it just goes whoosh, and it starts the track. And that's always a nice little entrance. That was something I learned from her there. So I try to incorporate something like that. Depending on the style of music, particularly in dramedy, I don't use introductions. I just go straight into the melody or whatever the A section is. It depends on the kind of tunes. If I was doing a guitar blues, I might do an intro with a turnaround of, a 5-4-1 turnaround, da-dun, da-dun, and then into the blues. So it just depends on the style of music.
All right. What do you want to listen to next?
Well, let's do one more of the dramedy ones. Let's go to the next track, number 8, On the Move.
Okay, so which is the purple one, second from the bottom on the thing. Okay.
Yeah, so this is just a faster track. Now it's the exact same format. It's an ABA, but the A sections are twice the length of the B section. And and just listen to how the orchestration changes, how from section to section, to help it to grow from the beginning till the end.
All right, and follow along the waveform. Purple one, second from the bottom of the shot.
And from that waveform, I think you could see where the B section starts.
You can. Okay, this is On the Move.
So you heard some deliberate edit points there between the sections where the music actually stopped, and that worked. It doesn't always work, for just to put in stops like that, but musically it worked just fine.
I heard a piece the other day. Somebody was talking about edit points. And funny enough, that piece of music that they were playing had, I believe, I'm doing this from memory, had like a reverse cymbal connecting to a frontways cymbal. So it's kind of and the cymbal went right through the edit point. And I know from my vast number of audio post sessions that I've done that nothing is more frustrating to somebody trying to edit music than having a reverb tail that goes through an edit point, or unless you have the same reciprocal thing on the other end, which you don't always. But cymbals and backward cymbals on edit points are bad news.
And that was the point I was trying to make about things carrying over from the end of one section to the next. So yeah, it just makes it much harder for the editor to do that.
Absolutely. All right. What do you want to listen to next?
We can move on to another structure. So let's look at number 6, Silly Willy. So this starts to follow the same format, the ABA structure. So it's a double A length, and then we jump to a B section. Then we go back to the A, but rather than repeating the A, now we're introducing a C section, a third element. It's a third element because it is different enough from the other sections, but it's similar enough that it's sort of acceptable. So you might think it's like an A section that sort of grew. Let's kind of just listen to it, and then you can kind of see what I'm talking about.
I keep forgetting I've got 2 laptops going here. Whoops. Do that. Here we go. Silly Willy, number 6.
This is the B section. This is C. This was homage to Hanna-Barbera cartoons.
And, somebody in the chat room said because the title Silly Willy, it should be about Bill Clinton. I couldn't help but think of sneaking an intern out of the Oval Office and completely out of the White House as this piece of music was playing. Sorry, Bill Clinton, but it'd be just too perfect for that.
Yeah. So what I did with the C section that made it different and was kind of important is that there were a lot of stops in it. So this is something that can be used by the editor when the characters are doing something. Somebody does something dumb. there's a pause, and one person says, "Are you kidding me?" And then play a little silly music again, and then it pauses again, and the other person just goes, you know, those type of moments are brilliant, and you'll get a lot of use if you can provide those types of elements with the stops.
It's interesting that you're talking almost as if this would be treated like score in the context that you just explained. But it wouldn't be score. If anything, though, the video editor, if they have any musical chops at all, might be editing this music to fit the picture. And to some degree, a tiny degree, they may alter how long they stay on a shot or something to make it fit the music. Because this is a particularly good dramedy track, I think, just laying a compliment on you, and has a ton of potential uses.
Yeah, so that C section really is an element that wouldn't be used that often, because there wouldn't be that many possibilities for it. They would primarily use the A section because it has that goofy, bouncy kind of beat, and that would be used a lot. But the other ones, it's like if they have that opportunity, here's the perfect moment, and it's within the structure of this entire piece. So that could possibly, a lot of times they edit the video to the music that they have, because if they find something that works, a lot of these, I think you even said it, a lot of these editors have a musical background, so they get beats, they get tempo, and they know how to cut things to make it fit to the music.
I had a question about that one. Oh, the C section. Is there a goal when you create a C section? Like, do you have kind of a default, okay, I'm going to create a C section, therefore I have to do this musically, or is it just whatever you want it to be?
I try to keep it within the realm with the same vocabulary as the rest of the piece. It's just something that, as I was writing it, it just felt like it should be in there. I mean, if they only going to use 12 seconds of this cue, they'll never get to that. So I mean, I really haven't lost anything. That's the kind of thing that's more for me, and this is where we'll talk even a little bit more about breaking the rules, and this kind of breaks the rule of this suggestion of an ABA structure, adding this third section that's so different than the rest of it, but it could give you some options.
If you had to venture an educated guess, would you say that the majority of cues, not just that you make, but the majority that you've heard and are aware of and that friends compose and that you see getting, well, on TV, you don't know if they're one structure or another because you're only seeing, 5 seconds or 19 seconds or whatever, is AABA the most common structure for people who are just starting out and they don't want to they want to stick with something tried and true? Should they stick with AABAA as kind of the default structure until they become more competent?
Yeah, or just simply ABA, and the length of each section is up to you, really. But yeah, traditionally that's the basic structure that you should aim for. You're right. If you're watching a clip of a scene from a show and you only hear a part of it, you actually don't know what the structure is of that cue, unless you can go to the music library and hear it isolated and get an idea of what they actually wrote. But in general, you're going to improve your odds of placements if you stick to this basic structure.
Any other pointers while we're talking about people just starting out? I know that, let's say, the average length is approximately 90 seconds. That's the middle of the bell curve, if you will. Tempo and the type of cue and the mood dictates the tempo. The tempo is going to dictate how many bars are in an A section before it gets to a B section and such. Do you cover stuff like that in this book? Because I know, to be honest, I learned to read music a zillion years ago when I was like 12 years old, and I can still look at a chart and know where I am as I'm listening to the music, but I forget what a lot of the notation is. It was intimidating when I looked at the book and saw a lot of score in there. Is this book well suited for people just starting out, or is it for more advanced people because of all the score stuff that's in there for each one of these cues that we're listening to?
I think if you don't read music, I think each chapter, each song describes each section of the music and what's happening in words. In English, it describes what is happening. And then there's a snippet of a bar or two bars that we're talking about. And if you don't read music, but if you have an ear, you can listen to the accompanying MP3 file and hear it, and you should be able to get sort of a general sense of what, I mean, we've explained to you what is happening. It's a piano playing da 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 da, and you hear that on the recording. You hear that sound. The score is provided if you hear a sound, like if you heard a sound from a passage from a Beethoven symphony, and you wanted to be able to reproduce that. You could either try to transcribe it yourself, which you can also do here, or go to the score and try to understand what the notes are saying. And I think it's reasonable for anybody to try to learn just the very basics of music notation. The notes on the lines, E, G, B, D, F, and that's every good boy does fine. And the notes in the spaces are FACE, and it spells a word. If you can do that and just go to a piano, pluck out some notes, you should be able to kind of decipher, what I have in the book. But I think that there's enough verbal explanation that, would help somebody understand exactly what is happening.
I agree. And I was taught every good boy deserves favor.
Oh, okay.
That's how they did it in Farmville, USA, and Central Illinois. Every good boy deserves favor. Okay. What do you want to listen to next?
Okay, let's move on to start off with number 2, Ring of Power. So I want to talk about a format which is only an A section, and it repeats over and over and over. And you might think, well, that's really boring. That's just a loop. Well, a 12-bar blues is just an A section that repeats over and over and over. Okay, so in this track, Ring of Power, it's an 8-bar phrase, and it's going to start off with just piano, and then with each 8-bar phrase that follows it, we're going to be adding additional instrumentation, and the orchestration is going to increase in volume and intensity. I need to pull up this real quick here. So I'll just give you a brief rundown of what you're going to be hearing. So it's going to start with a piano playing the first 8 bars. On the second 8 bars, we're going to introduce a viola playing an ostinato, da 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 da, just a rhythmic pattern that repeats. The next A section, we're going to, and with each section, we maintain what we had before that. So we're maintaining the piano and the viola. Now we're adding a string pad on top of that. The next A section, we're going to add a violin playing a melody, and we're also going to sneak in some drums in there. The next section, we're going to also include some low brass, and then we're going to put in bigger drum hits. The next section, we're going to add the choir. And the section after that, the choir is going to get even bigger. And then we're going to add a French horn playing the melody. And then finally, we're going to end it with a piano, and as it diminishes in volume.
I'm looking forward to hearing this because it points up an example of something I saw addressed on another YouTube show the other day, that a gentleman who I respect and think he's a smart guy, apparently nobody ever taught him before. He's had talked about developmental arc and thought, I think, unless I misunderstood him, that he thought the developmental arc was only executed compositionally. And I guess you could make the point that adding extra instrumentation is in fact compositionally, but it's really texturally that you can. I'm making the point, and it's not even a counter argument. It's more of an add-on that you can create a developmental arc and give a piece a sense of forward movement and keep it from sounding too linear and boring and repetitive like a loop by simply starting out skinny as far as the number of instruments, and then adding one in the next 4 bars or 8 bars, adding another, and doing exactly what you just described, and yet stay on one thing all the way through. So thank you for including that in today's episode. I'm sorry, did you say number 2, Ring of Power?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So this will be the orange waveform, and here we go.
See how small it starts small and gets louder?
Where is this? Ring of Power. Here we go. Definitely demonstrative of a developmental arc in the graphic realm.
There's the ostinato, if you can hear that.
That was great. Great example of my favorite phrase, developmental arc.
I wrote in the book, under the usage section, how can this cue be used? I said, the music is a journey from understated simplicity to unrestrained glory, like those big words. Examples might include a montage sequence spanning someone's life, a soldier returning from war, an athlete from training to winning the gold medal, anything that tells a story. So, I mean, that was what the objective was in writing a piece like this.
Do you think, in terms of mood and emotion, and maybe even a title before you start a piece, so that you've got a target, or do you? Let's say that you're not working on assignment, so somebody hasn't said, "I need a triumphant, heroic orchestral piece." And you actually have the luxury of sitting down and thinking, what shall I do today that I could then send out to a library that they might want? And you come up with something big and orchestral and heroic. Some people have told me they start with the title so that they're always aiming at the target as they're writing. Other people will actually take like a little miniature whiteboard or a Post-it note and write down epic, orchestral, triumphant, victorious, and put that somewhere, within eyesight as they're writing. Do you do that sort of stuff, or do you let yourself wander and see what you come up with?
I tried that. That approach didn't work for me. So I always start with a title. I always have an intention. I try to visualize a scene, like as if it were a movie. And sometimes it's not a complete scene. It's just like, visuals of certain kinds of things happening. You were asking about how do I figure out a tempo, like in Silly Willy, which was a kind of a comedic cartoonish piece. I pictured a character kind of lumbering along, walking. So I tried to write a tempo that fit like somebody walking, and and visualizing something like that in my head. Yeah, using keywords in that explains emotions, and those are the things you're going to add in your metadata anyway. If you can do that ahead of time, that's great. Oftentimes, though, I'll try to think of an emotion, and I don't quite hit it, and then I have to kind of rework my keywords. But I always try to visualize, what it is that this would be used for.
Cool. It seems to be working out quite well for you.
Okay.
And I want to mention that Steve is quite accomplished and has substantial credits, has done some scoring on shows as well as doing instrumental cues that have gone into libraries, gotten placements. But he does have a fairly intense full-time day job, writing code for iOS apps. So while this is far more than a hobby, it's pretty impressive that you've gotten to this level of stuff, number of placements, but the quality. I think it was Silly Willy, the one that had the tuba in it, if I remember correctly. And I just, yeah, very, very good sounding audio in that. Good samples. Great mix, everything about it. So congrats for a guy that does it part-time. You sound like somebody that works 20 hours a day.
Well, I don't sleep much.
All right, what would you like to listen to next?
Well, let's continue on this vein of a repeated A section. So the next track, number 5, No Mountain Too High. This is a similar type of thematic piece. Really, the big difference here is that I do introduce a B section at some point in the piece, but what it is really it's an A section, but I've modulated up a minor third just to add a little bit more tension to the piece, and then it returns back to the regular piece. But it also does the same sort of orchestrally. It adds instruments as it goes, and tries to grow and add more tension and release. Everything you write is about tension and release, whether it's comedy or dramedy or drama.
And the same is true for people who write scripts for TV and movies. They will tell you that it's all about tension and release.
Yes.
I'm not going to talk about what kind of movies those might be, but let's let's take a look at, this is number 5, which on today's waveform chart is the green one. Well, there are several green ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fifth one down, No Mountain Too High. Let's have.
And again, you see how it starts off quiet and the waveform gets louder and louder until the end.
Okay, here we go. Nice piece. Got to ask you the question. I was thinking it, but didn't want to bring it up until we heard it. And a couple.
37.
What? Your age?
Oh, oh no. Oh, okay. I was going to guess your question.
Oh, okay. The modulation. I was going to bring it up before, but I thought I should let people hear it before I bring it up. I've been told that as a rule of thumb, modulations can be a little bit of a kiss of death because it makes it more difficult for editors to chop the piece up because it's got a modulation. I was a little shocked when I saw that this had a modulation when I was prepping for the show yesterday. What made you decide to go with that, and how often do you do it, and is it a little bit of a kiss of death or not?
Well, yeah, you don't want to stay there. If you modulate, you want to return to the tonic key. You don't want an editor to try to end on that modulated key, because if your stinger is back in the tonic key, they won't match. So it's a little bit risky. You do it because, as we just said, tension and release. It's a very cinematic thing to do, especially going up a minor third and then returning. It's one of those things where the modulation wasn't until like a minute into the tune. So if they ever got that far, then they would hear it. So I don't find it too awfully risky. You just don't stay there very long. I think I was there for 8 bars and then bailed.
And frankly, I've heard a lot of modulations that hit you in the face a lot more than that one did. It was subtle. And within the context of what that piece was all about, subtlety was a wise choice, I believe, on your part. It was there, and it added the tension without going, whoa.
Yeah, and I say it's cinematic because you hear that kind of modulation all the time without even realizing it's just become part of our musical vocabulary. Whereas in the 70s, if you heard a Barry Manilow song where every chorus he modulated up a half a step, your track would never find a home if you did that today. You just don't do it.
Yep.
But yeah, let me just go over the usage on this. Now this was in 3, so it was a very lilting waltz, and it for me it just gives it a lot of motion. And so, as suggested by the title, this would cover humans struggling, overcoming insurmountable challenges. The cue builds and builds with a huge payoff, and it can be used in any type of montage where all seems hopeless but finally reaches the goal. Sports, invention, love, you name it.
I love the fact that you think about the bigger picture. A lot of composers live within their own little bubble, and they're so involved in the piece that they don't think about how it could be used, and usability is the name of the game. If you want to make money, if you want library owners to sign your stuff, and if you want music supervisors to pick your stuff from the catalogs, it's all about usability. And it sounds like, you don't just think of this stuff for the purpose of the book, right? You actually kind of live the life this way.
Right. These were tracks that I had already written when I decided to incorporate them into this book.
Right. Are these tracks in libraries, or am I going to be able to monetize this show, Steve?
No, I made sure that these are all tracks that I own.
Good man.
So
all right.
Clear.
I'm going to make myself about $24.38 then. Yay. Yeah, for those of you, I get emails from you guys every now and then. How much money do you make on Taxi TV? It averages out about $100 a month. We do this for love, not money. Trust me. But we really do it for love. All right. What do you want to listen to next?
Well, it depends. We have time, you think, maybe for 1 or 2 more tracks?
Oh, yeah. We've got a good half hour or more.
Okay, well then let's jump into number 4, Angels and Demons.
Okay. Want to give us a little precursor speech?
So this is one of those things where we talked about breaking the rules, where it's not exactly A, B, A. It's A, B, C, which is, musically it's different than A or B, but it sounds so similar to the rest of the piece, you wouldn't really distinguish it as a wholly separate piece. Then it goes back to A, B, it does another B, and then it ends with a D section, a 4th section. But again, they sound so similar that it's just different enough. I changed the chord progression just slightly that technically it's A B C A B B D. Okay.
Say that A B C A B D D.
A B C A B B D.
Wow. And how does the D section, what did you do to come up with a D? Because I'm sure it's based on the A. It's a derivative of the A in some way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a slight modification to the chord progression at the end. And it was just a way to end the piece.
Wow. That's cool. I have not heard many cues with the D. So this is Angels and Demons. Let's listen for the D. Impressive. A couple people asked about which vocal libraries you use, and those were great sounding samples.
Oh yeah. Let's see. The vocal that was from Heaviosity's Gravity pack called Vocalese. Those were for the phrases. Yeah, this was inspired by Lord of the Rings. It wasn't really that melodic. It was mostly textural, and it was dark and brooding, and it's more of an underscore kind of piece. Um, it's just I wanted to incorporate something, a variety of stuff in this collection.
Um, that's a. I like the fact that you talked about that it's underscore and that you didn't use melody so much, but you accomplished the goal of effectuating the mood so well just using textural stuff. Any pointers on how to do that? Because I think most people would rely on melody to tell the story of the mood. How do you? What's the process in your head when you're using textures to create mood rather than melody?
So I learned long ago when doing alt mixes for libraries, when you're delivering your stems, you've got a full mix which has everything, the melody and all the accompanying background, and then you would also provide a no melody mix, and the reason you do that is so it doesn't interfere with dialogue. And I often found, number one, they often use that more than the melody version because it doesn't interfere in any way. And also, typically, it just sounded really good. I could have probably delivered all my tracks without a melody, and just having that sort of a textural kind of background, even if it were a dramedy piece. You don't always need melody. And also, I would tend to overwrite melodies, and then in the editing process, you would start taking notes out, because it's just, you don't need a lot of notes.
Fretman asked specifically, which Heaviosity vocalises did you use? Because there are 3 of them to choose from.
It was the original one, the first one.
Okay. Yeah, really good sounding. You could hear the breath control in a couple of places,
Yeah.
which lends itself to authenticity. I mean, some people like to take out fret noise on an acoustic guitar. Some people like to edit every breath out. More often than not, I always found when I was still making records that stuff adds vibe and authenticity to the project. So,
I mean, it sounds like a real vocalist, which it is. It is a real vocalist, but it makes it sound like this person came in for a session.
yeah.
And this piece was really designed to be more of like a trailer, maybe like the act 1 of a trailer.
Yeah, it would have been great in the trailer for the TV show Wednesday that was recently on whatever channel it was on. And clearly Lord of the Rings inspired, but in a good way. Okay, what's next?
Let's listen to it. We've heard this track before on Taxi TV. This is number 3, Fairy Tale Romance. So this was designed to be very Disney-esque, and it's A, B, A, C, A. Everything is built around the same chord progression, but the melody and the instrumentation changes up a bit. So it sounds like a lot of different sections, but it's really the A section being used over and over with just some bits to kind of stitch it all together.
Okay, this is Fairy Tale Romance. By the way, Steve, I just noticed I cut over to the shot that the audience doesn't see, and I saw you talking over that. We weren't hearing either you or I. Our mics go dead when I pull up the waveform. So do you want to repeat some of the stuff that you were telling us while it was playing? Or were you talking to your wife?
Oh, I wasn't talking to you.
Oh, you were? Okay.
No.
Oh, okay. It's like, yeah, honey, I'll be done with this Laskow thing in a little bit. Can you believe he asked me to do another one of these shows?
No, I got some cats I have to feed. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought you were giving really profound background information on these while they're playing, and it's like, oh crap, he's going to have to repeat all this. Oh, good. Awesome. That's a beautiful piece, and that was a great example of how melody actually completely tells the story. I mean, if all you had was a solo instrument playing that melody, you would know how to feel.
Yeah, this one was melody strong, and I do have alt versions of it without the melody, and it's makes for a nice bed, but the melody really sells it, and I'm going for a very specific. I'm looking for a Hallmark movie to put this in, where they live happily ever after.
Of course they do. All right, we still have like 20 some minutes left, and I do want to do some Q&A with the audience, so you want to let's do one more. What's your choice?
Well, let's do the first one, Beyond the Stars. Now this one is the big breaking of the rules. This is in music theory you would call through composed, where it just starts at the beginning and goes to the end, and nothing repeats. It just, there's an A section and a B section and a C section, and nothing relates to one another. But this was designed to be an ode to Star Trek in that thematic world.
I feel like I'm appropriately dressed.
Yeah.
All right, let's listen to Beyond the Stars. And this will be the top waveform in red. And we're back. That was beautiful. Somebody asked earlier if you ever record any acoustic instruments or if all this stuff is sample work. Whatever it is, it's impressive sounding.
Yeah, I rarely work with real musicians. Everything's in the box. I mean, it's an expense thing, paying musicians. I mean, honestly, a lot of these production music cues over their lifetime, I would hardly cover the cost of hiring musicians, because it's a numbers game, getting a lot of placements, a lot of royalties from that. It adds up to something, but by itself, this is a pennies game.
I think I've probably told you this, but recently deceased, really a very dear friend of mine, a guy named Jim Long, who is arguably the godfather of production music libraries, certainly the godfather of making it into a huge industry. And he happened to be the first person I met when I moved to Los Angeles. and we remained friends for 30 some years. And as a matter of fact, we honored him on stage at the Road Rally this past year. Kind of a posthumous Lifetime Achievement Award. And he once said to me, it's a penny industry, but those pennies sure can add up. How many libraries are you in at this point?
I've really cut down on the number of libraries because certain libraries work for you and some of them don't. So I've stopped contributing to some of the smaller libraries, and some libraries, where I've contributed and I haven't really seen a return yet. I mean, and I know it does take time, but they also haven't come back and said, hey, can you do more of this or that? So I'll just move on and try to work with. But I've got a couple of libraries that probably I get a majority of my work from, and then I'm working on my own stuff. So I'm trying to own all of the music all the time.
Yeah, not a bad way to go. If you've well, that's a whole other show. Yeah, there's so many things. But you also said that some of the smaller libraries, we've got some of the small libraries that have been taxi clients for easily a decade, maybe two, have hit a lot of home runs for people. So I hope people don't take that comment to mean, oh, I shouldn't sign with a small library. It's all about, do their clients need the kind of music you're making? And it's a wise... Well,
that's a big thing.
Yeah.
I don't write hip hop, for example, and some of these libraries might do a majority of their work with hip hop music. And so I'm not going to be the guy for them.
Right.
Fundamentally, I do orchestral music.
Is it harder when you do orchestral? I mean, most of what we've heard today is not going to be a valid contender for a reality show. It would be in a Hallmark show. It would be in a National Geographic with the sun coming up over a glacier and a mama polar bear and her cub playing kind of stuff. It's more grandiose than most reality shows I've seen. Mm-hmm. Does it make it harder for you to earn income because you're not doing a lot of dramedy hip hop stuff?
Yeah, and that's a personal choice I made. I mean, there was a period where I did tons of dramedy music and made good money from it. But I've, sort of moving my focus to things that I want to do. And I mean, maybe it's because I have a day job and I have a steady paycheck. I can afford to do what makes me happy. That's why I'm going to do big orchestral stuff and aim for the documentaries and the Hallmark movies.
A couple people have asked about mastering, and I'm curious myself as a retired engineer. It's not like you can use a mastering plugin, kind of hit the same button every time because of the nature of what you do.
I do.
You do? Oh my God, I'm floored because come on, mastering an epic orchestral piece versus doing a dramedy piece. That's apples and oranges. Yeah, they're both music and fruit,
yeah.
But wow.
Well, look, every instrument and every group of instruments is EQ'd and compressed individually. So the mastering process is the culmination of all the buses together. And it's really just limiting and just adding a little sparkle to it. But I don't really master. I mean, the idea of mastering to me is if you're putting a whole collection together for an album, they should all sort of match sonically. Where I'm doing a piece here and a piece there, I can only mix it the best I can mix it. Some publishers will run everything through a master engineer. It depends how they're publishing their collections. If it's an album or just one-off pieces.
And which software do you use to master?
There's a Waves GW, which is Greg something. You know what? I can look right now. I've got this thing open. Give me just 1 second here. So sorry.
Greg Wells.
Greg Wells, thank you.
Yeah, that's from the boys in the audience, specifically Edmund Red and Ben Bowman and Carl Wurzbach. He said, "No, I don't have him looking at the chat. Only I'm seeing the chat." What else did I have?
Sorry, it's Greg Wells mix centric.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's basically a compressor, but it adds some sparkle to the mix that I just love.
Yeah, your stuff sounds amazing. It really does. How many hip hop tracks did you do before you decided to pursue what you really enjoyed doing? What did you say? Dramedy cues?
Dramedy.
That's what I meant. Sorry.
A couple of hundred. I've done a lot of dramedy. Yeah.
And
no hip hop.
Are they still out there being your bread and butter as far as income?
Oh my God, I'm still making money. Some of these tracks are 10 years old, and I'm still making money on them.
Wow. Andre Sapanian wants to know, how do you decide on the volume of the drum hits and shots like in your track Ring of Power? That's a good question. I like that.
That's like mixing trailer music, and there's a lot of work to go to make. First of all, to make the drums sound big, and to compress them, but make them pop. But it's a lot of it's about layering. It's not just one drum; it's many drums. EQing, compressing. Watch a lot of YouTube videos.
Don't we all?
Just do a lot of it. It's repetition, doing it over and over and over.
Yeah, taste is developed, and that's what it comes down to, is your personal taste. I mean, aside from things like that drum is so loud, it's blowing up the computer it's being played on. But there's no way. Experience. Repetition and experience. People ask me engineering questions all the time. It's like stuff that I wouldn't even think about. If I sat down behind an SSL today and started making a record, it would take me a day to get refamiliarized with my workflow maybe in the room. But after that, you don't even think about it. You reach for EQ, you reach for compression, you dial stuff in intuitively because you've done it 10,000 times before. You don't have to sit there and think, well, the tempo of the song is this, the drummer's hitting about this hard. You just know. So I'm guessing that's...
Well, like especially with big drums. I mean, a lot of these big drums, there's so much low end frequency stuff that that's not what you're looking for. So I'll roll off like under 50 hertz, and like increase like at the 200 hertz, for the smack. That's all I want, is the smack part of it. But you're getting some residual low end, but you don't want it to consume the entire frequency spectrum. You got to just decide what part of the drum sound are you actually looking for.
Somebody, Martin Gravel, suggesting a mastering taxi TV show with you being the star of that episode. Would you be willing to come back and do that, where we have you master maybe one, like a dramedy track and an orchestral track? We'll have to figure out how to get your, using Wirecast, get your screen up on because obviously we're not going to talk them through without letting them see your DAW. But
if we can work that out, then absolutely.
All right, cool. Time for a couple more questions. If anybody has one that I missed. Going back, scrolling up. I gotta say, your cats are on their best behavior.
No, I don't know if you could. I just heard one meowing right now.
We can't hear him. No more questions coming in. As soon as I go to end the show, then we'll get 5 questions in a row. Always happens. How much compression? There you go. How much compression do you use for sampled instruments, for instance, strings?
Just enough.
See, there you go, because you know intuitively what just enough is.
I mean, like that's the thing when people ask you a question like how much compression, it's like there's not just a answer that you can say. You compress this. It depends on the instrument. It depends on exactly what they're playing, how it has to interact with other instruments. But I will recommend this free plugin called OTT, which does compress quite well and really adds a lot of bite, especially for things like strings, where you need them to poke through, and also for drums as well. Get a really nice bright smack.
Something a lot of people don't know is they will go for fast attack when they're compressing drums, because it's a very percussive instrument, and they figure, I want to get it right from the get-go. What they don't understand is that, and it took me a couple of years of not being happy with the results I was getting till one day maybe somebody told me, or I figured it out on my own. I remember a long time ago, but slow attack is what you want, because you want to give the sound a moment to develop, that split second of development of the full sound before you squish it. So remember that. It's slow attack, fast release, or medium fast release is generally a better prescription for compression on drums. Let's see. Now we have a bunch of questions. Going back, preferred orchestral sample libraries. What are those?
Depending on what I'm doing. For like lush orchestral, like for strings, I started using modern scoring strings. For a bulk of my work for strings, I use Cinematic Studio strings. They're like bread and butter strings. For brass, I've either used Cinebrass or, which was called the Junkie XL brass, the Tom Holkenberg brass. Woodwinds, I'm using a lot of the Cinematic Studio series. Their woodwinds are great. Their brass is actually great. Most of the percussion work I've done, I use Cineperk. But depending on the style, like if I'm doing trailer music, that's a whole subject of drum sounds.
Robert else wants to know, do you still use staff pads? Somebody asked this earlier, so it's like asking for a friend.
Occasionally I because I've been so busy with trailer stuff, it doesn't really translate. But like if, for example, Fairy Tale Romance I wrote in staff pad because it's a beautiful way to orchestrate. So if I'm doing that kind of writing, yeah, definitely.
What is your this is from Katrina Seifert. What's your composing workflow with your day job? For example, a time of day to compose and how many hours, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So since the pandemic, I've been able to work from home. So that cut out 3 hours of commuting time a day. So I will put in those 3 hours actually in the morning before I start work. And then there are often times where during the day where I'm waiting for somebody to get something done, so I don't really have something to do. So my DAW is open all the time. So even if I have 5 minutes, I'll be editing a MIDI part or working on something. So I might say I probably average 4 hours a day composing, and I don't work after 4:30. I turn everything off and I don't work on anything.
What do you do? Like feed the cats and brush them?
Feed the cats, feed the humans, and
Really? So you don't work at all on any sort of stuff after 4:30 in the afternoon?
I try not to. Occasionally, like I got a call for a custom for a trailer cue, and those are rarely can you win those. But yeah, I ended up working an entire Saturday, to get it done over the weekend.
Yeah.
But I try not to work in the evenings.
Wow, that's admirable. I'm going to do that in my next life. I'll tell you, I come into the office Monday morning pissed off because I just spent the majority of my weekend working, and I feel cheated. But you know what? It's what it takes to make this company run that well.
Well, I've just learned to be very efficient at what I do. I spent a lot of time learning my software, and I don't want to be spending a lot of time looking for sounds. I know my library. I know what I have. I know what I need, and it's just a matter of like knowing you don't have a lot of time, so you have to be efficient.
Mike Evans wants to know, do you use the expression, modulation, and volume automation on your string tracks to make them sound more realistic?
Yeah, I don't use volume automation, but I use CC1 and CC11, which is modulation and expression. So typically they ride hand in hand. Some libraries are slightly different, but often I'll record modulation, CC1, and then just copy it to CC11, and that seems to work out pretty well.
For those of us who've never done that and don't know what CC1 and CC11 are, can you give a brief explanation?
Yeah, so sample libraries, they have these controls. You can program various MIDI controls. There was like 127 in the original MIDI spec. There was 127 MIDI controls that you can assign to do whatever custom thing. The first one, CC1, and CC stands for continuous controller. That's generally defined for expression, or often it's thought of as volume, depending on the library. CC11 is generally assigned to the expression element. So expression is like the way you would blow on an instrument, say like an articulation, like a trumpet. If you blow softly, it's kind of a mellow tone. The harder you blow, the more brittle it sounds. That's what expression is. So as you crank that up, and that goes along with volume, it gets louder, but it gets angrier.
Sounds like my first wife. Sorry, I couldn't pass that up. Now, we've been divorced for 35 years. I just love it. I just love a good Henny Youngman joke. And the young kids in the room are going, Henny who? All right, one last question, then we're going to wrap up. What time do you get up in the morning? That's from Riney Bear.
Oh, my God. Somewhere between 5 and 6.
Wow, and you work out for a couple hours, go for a run, and come back and shower and sit down and do your real work?
No, I stare at my iPad and drink coffee.
Well, this is a form of exercise.
Yeah, we've got a couple machines in the house. We've got an elliptical and a treadmill, and I try to get on those during the day, just so I put on some pandemic weight, and I still haven't been able to get it off.
You are not alone, my friend. For those of you who don't have this book, obviously after today's show, I think you're convinced that it could be tremendously helpful in getting you up to speed on how the structure of production music is done. It's not just, this is what I'm feeling and lay it all out. There's actually a method to the madness. And this book includes a picture of Steve on the back not holding a black Les Paul.
So it shows you I actually do write music on paper.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, but the other book, does this book have it? Yeah, there we go. This shot, I've seen this shot now for like, how long have I known you? 15, 20 years maybe?
Oh, that picture is so old. I'm embarrassed.
I know. But your hair still looks the same, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, also a great book. I can't imagine any of you watching the show don't have this book, but if you don't, absolutely you have to get it.
Yep. Please buy the books. I need to put my cats through college.
Oh, Steve, your sense of humor is perfectly dry. I love it. All right. Well, give my best to the cats and Leanne. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this and let me drive you mildly crazy over the weekend. I honestly don't. I have an idea for a show next week, but I haven't locked it down entirely yet. So I'm not going to tell you what it is because it could change. But with that, I would once again like to thank my friend Steve Barden for doing an amazing job on today's show. We will see you next week. Don't forget, if you haven't given us a like, please do. If you are not a subscriber to the channel, but you like what you saw today and want to see more of this, please hit the subscribe button. I will see you guys in a week. Thanks again, Steve. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michael.
I hit the wrong cue. Woohoo, imagine that. They're going to revoke my post-production license.
All right. Well, it seems like that went well.